Just there you go. You should be able to unmute now.
Cara, alcoholic. By the grace of a God that I don't always understand, but is of my own understanding, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, great sponsorship, and the fellowship of women in these rooms. 2 weeks ago, I celebrated 21 years of continuous sobriety. My sobriety date is April 1st, 2004. I have a sponsor. His name is Sam O. I have a home group, which is the Camden BYOB meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet Mondays at 7 p.m. On Camden Drive at the Episcopalian Church. If you're ever in Los Angeles, I welcome you. I have commitments at meetings. I sponsor 13 women. I know one of which is on the meeting today. Hi, Alicia. I see you. She said, I hope I'm at the right one. I said, I see you in the square, and you are. I have about 14 grand sponsees and 5 great grand sponsees. I've worked all 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in a committed relationship with 10, 11, and 12. And I host a book study at my house on Tuesday evening for the girls in my sober family. I share all of that with you, not to tell you how great I am, but to tell you how absolutely batshit crazy I am and how I do this program one day at a time. Someone once said, like, the more sponsees you have, tells you that how sick you are. So I guess I'm really sick because I got a lot of them. But I share that when I speak at any meeting because my sponsor said if people don't get anything after you share that, at least they know what you did and that it works. And that's the message that I want to leave you with today about Alcoholics Anonymous. This program does absolutely work, with the caveat that you have to work it. When I first got sober, there was a lot of people, old timers. Now that I guess I'm somewhat of an old timer, I've determined that I want to use the term long timer because old just sounds awful. But a long timer said this isn't a program for people who want it because there's a lot of us who want it. This isn't a program for people who need it because there's a lot of us who need it. This is a program for people who are willing to go to any lengths to get it. And I know that to be true today. I want to thank my dear friend Jay for asking me to speak. Um, I admire you so much. I look up to you so much. You are just a man of dignity and grace. You know, the 12 and 12 often talks about the elder statesman, the person that sits in the room that does this thing. They don't worry about how many years they have, they worry about how many days they have. And I've watched you show up, you suit up, you walk the walk, you talk the talk. And as much as I did not want to show up at 5 p.m. on a Saturday night to speak on a Zoom meeting, if Jay Westbrook asks you to do something, you say, absolutely. It is an honor and a privilege to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know what that meant 2 decades ago, but I sure as hell do now. Everything I have in my life is a direct result of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys built up a scared little girl into a less scared woman who has a path that is laid before me on how to walk through life on life's terms. And for that, I am eternally grateful. If you're new to Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to welcome you. I know how hard it is to get on the meeting. I know how hard it is to walk into the room. You're in the right place. I hope you're desperate. I hope that everyone's answered your last phone call. I hope that you have nowhere else to go. I hope that you have hit, the bottom of the barrel. I hope you have what the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous calls the gift of desperation, because then maybe you'll stay. I know that's what it took for me. And if you're celebrating an anniversary or a milestone, congratulations. It's a miracle that any of us are here. And it is through the grace of a God of my own understanding that I can show up today as the woman that I am, because I'm not the woman that walked in these rooms 2 decades ago. I hate speaking at meetings. I am a taker. I'm a taker by nature. When I was out there using, I'd take your time, I'd take your peace of mind, I'd take your money, I'd take your alcohol, I'd take your man. Women don't like when I say that, but that's the kind of selfish jerk that I am. I'm just filled with 100 forms of fear. And I created all of these tools to keep me separate. And when I'm asked to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm immediately flooded with that fear, right? I'm afraid I'm going to lose something I have, which is my idea of myself, or I'm not going to get something that I want, your approval, your attention, your validation, your acceptance. And I'm so desperate for all of those things. I'd rather just sit anonymously on a square and listen, or as some people say, judge the speaker. I don't know how to be vulnerable. It doesn't come naturally to me. I'm so desperate for your approval, and I'm so afraid that you're not going to like me. And more than anything, I want to be able to share the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so before I get on any meeting, I hit my knees and I pray to that God of my own understanding. And I say, God, please remove this selfish, self-seeking need to be perfect and loved. Allow me to share your message as you see fit. Speak through me, because I know that really this isn't about me. This is about you, but my self-centered mind, it makes it about me. And I'm so grateful that I have tools today that I can show up and say, that's all nonsense. Anytime I'm asked to speak, the first thought I have is, you're going to get on there and you're going to give the best share that Alcoholics Anonymous has ever heard. They're going to love you so much that they're going to ask Jay if you can come back every week. They're going to give you a standing ovation. You're the best speaker that Alcoholics Anonymous has ever had. Bill Cleveland, who? Chuck Chamberlain, nonsense. Wow, Cara S. is the best. And as soon as I'm done with that thought, boom, the second thought. You're the biggest loser. You don't have anything anyone wants to hear. They're going to hang up immediately. They're going to start booing. See, I've never heard anyone in Alcoholics Anonymous get booed. But in my fantasy, you're booing me. You're calling Jay, wow, that was the worst speaker. We should remove you from, speaking seeking and replace you with someone else because she was really bad. Because I can never be here. I've got to be better than you or worse than you. I don't know how to be with you. That's my resting place. I'm restless, I'm irritable, and I'm discontent. And I'm full of self. My favorite conversation to have is with me about me. I don't need anyone else to participate. I can have a conversation with you about me without you even opening your mouth. I don't even have to know you. I can tell you what Linda's thinking about me, what David's thinking about me, what Naomi's thinking about me. I could go through every square and I can talk and talk myself into separation. That's how the disease of alcoholism works in my mind. I have a disease that centers in my mind, and I have an allergy to being uncomfortable. And so I have to take a contrary action, and I have to show up and I have to hit my knees and I have to be willing to share God's message and hope that I touch one person. That's the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was thinking like, I mean, this is how insidious the disease is. I got on and I was like, God, man, I'm just not a Zoom person. Like, I'm gonna suck because I'm just not a Zoom person. I'm having this conversation with me about me, just to myself as everyone else is enjoying getting to know people. And I'm just starting to push myself away, get myself separate. I'm just like, ugh, Zoom's just, it's not the same as being in person. Like, God, I'm much better in the room where I can connect. And then suddenly I catch myself and I'm like, you're doing it. Your alcoholism is doing it. It's separating you from all of these people. And then I know I have a disease of perception. And so I have to shift that. And I go, wow, Ann T's in here from Virginia. And we got Diane from Arkansas and David from Tampa and Jorge from Illinois. And I saw get Norm from Wyoming. And I reframed for me this message of like, no, this is connection. Because where can all of these people from all different areas of the country and maybe even the world congregate together? I see people from Canada, Bernie, congregate together and hear the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I'm just like, oh, I'm at ease. These are my people, and I can just quiet the voices that want to keep me away from you and connect to the what is, which is I get to participate in my recovery today. And thank God for that. Thank God for that. So I want to go ahead and qualify for a minute. I I was born and raised in a town in Texas, a town called El Paso, Texas. My mom's a Russian Jew. My dad's an Italian Catholic, and they sent me to Episcopalian school. So you can imagine my relationship with God. I see Naomi's laughing from Australia. You get it. Was a little confusing, and from the moment I came out of the womb, I was uncomfortable. I was convinced that my insides did not match your outsides. You all seemed like you had it all figured out, and inside, it was a nightmare. I had a mind that told me I wasn't good enough. They're not going to like you. You shouldn't even try. You're different. You're never going to fit in. And I had what I now know is this God-sized hole inside of me that no amount of love or attention or approval or validation or acceptance, all the things I shared about earlier, could fill. And I was raised in a two-parent household. Neither of my parents are alcoholics. I share that because when I first came into the room of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would listen to any part of your story that wasn't like mine to separate myself. And sometimes I would hear these stories of people's childhoods and I would say, well, that didn't happen to me. How do I know that I'm an alcoholic? What I learned to be true is what happened to me or didn't happen to me as a child, what my mom was like, what my mom did, what my dad was like, what my dad didn't do, that's all just information. Information that I get to uncover, discover, and discard, like Chuck Chamberlain talks about in A New Pair of Glasses. What makes me alcoholic is when I put alcohol into my system, I lose the ability to control and manage my drinking. So if you're in here and my story isn't your story and you can't relate, that's okay. Keep coming back. Blame Jay, come back next week. I'm sure he got a fire speaker then. You're in the right place. That's what I know to be true. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. Like where I grew up, people didn't talk about alcoholism. I didn't see it in my parents, and I was just sick with myself. I had a peptic ulcer when I was 5 years old, a stress ulcer. I'm not sure at 5 what I was stressed with, but for me, that's untreated alcoholism. I had really curly hair, that Ashkenazi Jew hair, and I would find an iron every morning before school and I would iron my hair straight. This was before the Dyson Airwrap for the ladies that are of a certain generation. You know what I'm talking about? And I would go to school. I was just so desperate to fit in with you. I was just so desperate to fit in. And if I felt like if I looked like you, then maybe what you would see that I didn't feel like you. And then I'd go to Jewish Hebrew school and I'd find a toilet and I'd dunk my hair in the toilet so it would curl up because I wanted to look just like them. I was so desperate to be a part of and I felt so acutely not a part of. And that was my alcoholism. That's what I know to be true today. I had the obsession to drink before I ever put alcohol in my body. I saw the effects that alcohol produced on the people around me, namely my parents. When my mom drank, she was just a little bit more relaxed. She'd have a club soda and cranberry with vodka, sometimes at dinner. She never drank the whole thing, but she was just a little bit more relaxed. My dad would have a beer and he was just a little bit more connected. And I clocked that. I had that obsession. I was like, that's the solution. You know, that's the solution. And so I planned my first drink. My mom was out of town working. My mom's an attorney. My dad used to work was the chief of juvenile probation. So you can imagine how that plays later on in life. And I convinced my dad to take my baby brother on a father-son trip. I was already just well into my alcoholism of manipulating and conniving and just all in self-will. I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to make it work for me. And paid off the babysitter, got some alcohol, and I can tell you to this day, I remember where I was in the house, what I was wearing, what it tastes like, but more important, I remember the feeling I had when I took that first sip, and it was this. I immediately no longer cared about what you thought of me, and I no longer cared what I thought of me. I had a spiritual experience and I felt freedom. And I knew that I would never ever live life without this ever again. This was my new best friend. You know, and the big book talks about first it was fun and then it was fun with problems and then it was just problems. I skipped the just fun and went straight to fun with problems. And, you know, a kid who was over that night also drank alcohol, got in the car on the drive home and crashed into a stop sign. He lived, his mom came over. I politely told her to go F herself, and there were consequences right away. Her father was the headmaster of the Episcopalian school that I went to, and so that didn't go over very well. But if you're anything like me, and the big book talks about it, that, you know, our alcoholic life becomes the only normal one. And I was just like, oh, these people are just in the way. You know, you're the problem. If you just let me do what I'm going to do, let me be a kid, let me whatever, then we wouldn't have a problem. You're the issue. It's not me. And so I started pulling geographics and I changed schools and I did all of the things. And really, the most important thing about my drinking and using is that I crossed every invisible line that I set for myself. I experienced pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. I did things that when you tell me that I did them, I can't believe that I did them other than the fact that I was there. Things I would never do sober. You know, by 14 years old, I had my first possession charge. By 15 years old, I was crossing the border into Juarez, Mexico with people I shouldn't have been with, doing things I shouldn't have been doing. At 16 years old, I was the lead witness in an attempted murder case as a result of drugs and alcohol being at the center of that experience. By 17 years old, I was off to California. I found MacArthur Park. And if you know Los Angeles, you know MacArthur Park is not where you want to be at 17 years old. I experienced psychosis as a result of the things that I was doing alcoholically. See, everything starts with alcohol, but if you're anything like me, I'll take anything to change the way I think and feel up here. And so I did other things alcoholically. I experienced psychoses, and at 18 years old, I almost died of this disease. And I got onto my knees and I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. And I gave that great alcoholic prayer, which is like, God, if you get me through this, I swear to God, I'll never do this again. And that's my sobriety date, April 1st, 2004. But the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is very clear. It talks about this disease being threefold. I have a physical allergy. I put alcohol into my system and I lose the ability to control and manage my drinking. All bets are off. I could make it home that night and end up in my bed. I could be under the 405 bridge smoking crack. Either one is possible. Both have happened. 2, I have a mental obsession. I tell myself lies. The greatest lie being that one day I'll be able to control and manage that drinking. And then I have this spiritual malady, which is my emotional unmanageability of dealing with life on life's terms. And if I'm not treating all 3 of those things, I'm not sober. But see, where I came from, like I said, they didn't talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that you guys existed. Not that you didn't exist, because you definitely did exist. But I didn't know that you existed, because where I grew up in Texas, it was more important what it looked like on the outside than what it felt like in the inside. And so everything I felt and everything I was experienced, I kept hidden. I didn't know that there was a place where I could go and share my experience and that you guys would be like, yeah, me too. So here I am. You've removed the best tool that I have, which is my alcoholism. And now I'm left with me. See, and I didn't know that everywhere I go, there I am. You know, I thought if I could change where I was, change where I lived, change who I was with, change what I did, that would fix me. And if you're anything like me, you're always looking for an external solution to an internal problem. I didn't realize that I had to be reorganized from the inside out. So you take away the best tool that I have, which is my alcohol, and now I'm walking around Los Angeles, California like an emotional terrorist. You know, I'm more irritable, I'm more dishonest. You know, I can't hold down a job because I don't know how to be employable. I can't be in a relationship. I don't know how to be a partner. I don't have friends. I don't know how to have friendships. I am so self-obsessed. You know, I don't realize like, oh, you know, in order to have a job, you have to be employable. And it's not my job, it's our job. I don't realize that in my relationships, it's not my relationship, it's our relationship. You know, I can walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I forget that it's our meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's my meeting. Chips take too long. They should just clap once for birthdays. Um, that secretary should get better speakers. I mean, it's nonsense. It's nonsense up here. I don't like the way the chairs are organized. Why does the meeting start at 7:30 and not 7? I mean, it's bananas because it's my meeting. It's not our meeting. It's my alcoholism, right? So I have nothing going on in my life, but I'm not drinking and using. But unfortunately for me, I'm the kind of alcoholic where my alcoholism is what caused my drinking. My drinking did not cause my alcoholism. I'll say it again. I'm the kind of alcoholic where my alcoholism caused my drinking. My drinking didn't cause my alcoholism. And it's going to treat itself. It's going to treat itself, and it's going to treat itself in one way or another. And I've seen three options as I've stayed around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 2 decades. I'm going to get a spiritual toolkit as a result of doing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to drink, or I'm going to put a gun to my head or a noose around my neck. Those are my options. Because I have a disease that centers in my mind and it talks to me in my own voice. And it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I'll share later on sort of what my disease looks like today and how it's alive and well. But so here I am without all of those things, walking around like an emotional terrorist, and I'm at a Coffee Bean, which is now a Starbucks, on Fairfax and Sunset. Jay appreciates that. And it's like a Tuesday, I think, at 10. And because that's where you go when you're unemployed, you have no friends or family or no money. I'm just hanging out at the coffee shop. And this beautiful man walks up the stairs. He's wearing all white. I was like, that's the hottest angel I've ever seen. And he just was radiating serenity. I can't even put it to words, but I can see him right now in this moment where he was, what he was wearing, how he looked. It was like the first drink. That's how vivid and clear this experience was. And he walked right up to me. I'd never seen him before in my life. And he said, "Hey, how are you?" I said, "I'm good." We got to talking. It was just sort of a benign conversation. And he asked me if I wanted to have dinner. And to the people who are like, she didn't go to dinner with a stranger, I don't think you realize how absolutely drop dead gorgeous this man was. So I was like, I'm going to dinner. Plus, I had no money. Plus, I wasn't eating well. Plus, I had nothing else going on in my life. So, it was just an easy yes for me. And we went to dinner that night. And it got time to take the drink order. And the waitress came over and asked if I wanted something to drink. And I said, "Oh, I'll just have a water. I don't drink." And he said, "Oh, are you sober?" And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, like, are you an alcoholic?" And I was like, "Well, seems a little too intimate for a first date, a little too personal." No, I don't know what that is, but it didn't sound like me because I didn't know that I could be an alcoholic. My idea of an alcoholic was not a cute 19-year-old, girl. I guess I was 21 at the time. 21-year-old girl living in Los Angeles, California that came from a good family. My idea of an alcoholic was some guy kicking the can, down at Skid Row. So I didn't know. And I said that I don't know what that is, but I can't drink because I just like can't control it. And it just like my life got really crazy. Step one, didn't know it. He said, "Oh, okay, I understand. I don't drink either." The next day he called me and he said, "Do you want to go to a meeting?" And I was like, "Wow, this is moving really quickly. I don't even know what he does for work, but he's inviting me to a work meeting. I don't even know what he does." But you know what? I'm unemployed, still don't have any money, don't have any friends. I have nothing else going on. So maybe I'll get another free meal, a date, and maybe there's a job opportunity. Like that's what my thinking was, always about me. And he took me to the Four Horsemen meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you've ever been to the Four Horsemen meeting, for anybody who knows Los Angeles, this huge meeting at the Jewish Community Center, the top of Mulholland. So nothing about it was walkable. So you're up there. You kind of feel like you're being held hostage if you're a newcomer and you don't know what you're walking into. And it felt like there were 450 people in the room. It was probably more like 100, maybe 150. And I walked in and I was like, "Oh, that's what's wrong with him. He's in a cult." But this was before Uber. I didn't have any money to call a cab. I was stuck. And I was petrified because you guys were holding hands and you were passing a basket and you were chanting and everyone seemed so happy and I was so miserable. But I had no other option but to stay. You know, crushed by a self-imposed crisis I could no longer postpone or evade. Here I was at the turning point, really and truly. And there was a guy by the name of Danny T speaking that night. And if you know Danny T, you know that he doesn't resemble anything like me physically. You know, I think he's in his 80s now. Jay, nod if you think he's in his 80s. Okay, he's in his 80s. You know, he had long hair and a handlebar mustache, and he served time in San Quentin, and he sold heroin, and he shot dope. And I mean, just really nothing about his story resembled anything about mine, except when he talked about his relationship with alcohol. He talked about alcohol being a solution for a problem that he experienced in his mind. He talked about that solution no longer working for him. And then he talked about picking up a spiritual toolkit as a result of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as a result, he experienced a life beyond his wildest dreams where he was free from the bondage of self. I sat in that meeting and I cried. And for the first time, maybe since I took that first drink, I experienced the phenomenon of hope. And I had never heard of you guys before. And I went home after that date and I Googled Alcoholics Anonymous and I started going to meetings and I started trying to follow that guy around, my hot angel. I was determined to make him my AA boyfriend, but he had 13 other AA girlfriends. Ladies, you know the type. And, but it worked. It worked. I kept going to meetings and I couldn't stand most of the meetings and I definitely didn't like any of you because you guys were happy, you know, and I was miserable. You guys had lives and I didn't, but I kept going really because I was so desperate. I had no other option. So when I say to the newcomer, I hope you're desperate, I sincerely hope you're desperate because if I didn't have that desperation, I wouldn't have kept coming back. And I got lucky. I fell into this meeting, the 1 p.m. meeting at the log cabin. I think that's probably where I met you, Jay. Maybe at the 7 a.m., but the log cabin. And there were these girls there, and they were like my age, and they were experiencing life like I was experiencing life. And I got in with them, you know, and they took me under their wings. And what I'll say, and I'm mildly emotional still from celebrating my 21 years because the women of Alcoholics Anonymous have carried me when I couldn't carry myself. You know, they put me on their shoulders and they walked me through complete and total discomfort and brokenness and emptiness. And they did that for me and they loved me when I did not feel like I was lovable. And for that, I am so grateful. I also think about the path of sobriety and how it has been laid with the people who thought that they could go back out there one more time and they never made it back in. And I let those people be a reminder of me too, for me too. You know, the truth is anyone can get sober. You know, I would venture to say 99% of everyone on this Zoom, if not 100%, is sober right now. It's staying sober. That's the bitch, you know? That's the hard part because it took me 21 years, 7,600 and something days to have what I have today. It takes me 21 seconds to lose it. That's the thing about alcoholism. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for me. I mean, I'll say like my alcoholism, when I wake up every morning, it's not like, hey, Cara, it's your alcoholism. I'm here to fuck shit up for you today. No, no, no. I'd see that coming a mile away. That's too obvious. My alcoholism talks to me in a whisper. Psst. Man, 4:30 Saturday, covering treasury for someone at my meeting on Saturday. Jay can find another speaker. He knows everybody. He'll understand if you cancel. Ugh. Man, that sponsee's calling me again about that relationship she probably shouldn't be in. I'm not going to pick up. My sponsor is tired of hearing me. I'm not going to call. Ugh, I don't have time to pray and meditate. My life's too big and important. I'll get God another time. And before you know it, I've separated myself from you. I've separated myself from God, and then a drink or a drug looks like the best option. That's my alcoholism today. You know, I have to stay vigilant, and I think about all of those people who went back out and never came back in. Or I think about those people who had double-digit sobriety and their best thinking was a noose around their neck. I mean, it happens, and that's the truth. I mean, I've watched people die of untreated alcoholism. You know, and when I got in with that group, they said, you got to do the steps. This is a 12-step program. There's no sense in sitting around here and not doing the steps. That would just be insane. So I got a sponsor, and I was convinced that it wasn't going to work for me. You know, because I'm terminally unique, I'm different, I'm, you know, not like you. But I was just going to prove you wrong. I was going to prove you wrong, but I got a sponsor, and she started taking me through the steps. Steps one, I had already done. You know, I knew I was powerless over alcohol and couldn't manage my own life. Real issue with two and three, you know, because of my childhood, feeling like God had created all of this turmoil. What is God? You know, all the things that people who, you know, like me, who think they're so intellectual, talk ourselves out of it. I mean, there's a whole book about it, or a whole chapter about it in our literature. And you know, the funny thing about long timers and people who've been around the room is that they allow you to have the experience of humility at your own time. And I had a sponsor who took me out to the ocean, and she said, "So you don't believe in God?" I said, "No, not really. Seen no proof. You know, why are there so many wars in the world? Why this? Why that? Why do bad things happen to good people all the time?" She said, "Okay." She goes, "Why don't you go to that ocean and stop the wave?" I said, "What?" She goes, "Go stop that wave." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And now I'm starting to think you guys are all nuts. And she was like, "You can't do it, can you? So there's got to be something bigger than you. So just hold on to that idea and be willing to turn it over to the thing that doesn't stop the wave, or that can stop the wave." It's like, okay, sure. I'll choose to believe. Turn it over to that idea that the universe has some power, right? And then I write down my 4-step. And what happened as a result, my 4-step was easy because I could tell you everything you did to me and all the problems and all your issues, and that's no big deal. And then I get to my 5th step, and I start to realize I'm dishonest in all of my affairs. I'm lying to me about me. Not only am I lying to you, I'm lying to me about me. I'm selfishly holding on to narratives to keep me stuck so I have a reason to blame. I'm wishing you were different than you were, than you're meant to be. I'm not compassionate. All of these things. And then as a result of 6 and 7, I'm like humbled. Like I don't have all the answers. All these tools that I've put in my tool belt to try and keep me safe have only kept me separate. I no longer want to be separate, and I'm willing to get rid of those things. You know, there's a great speaker, Wayne Butler, who I love so dearly, and he talks about the steps, and he says steps 1 through 3 are the steps of desperation. I'm so desperate that I'm willing. I'm willing to admit, and I'm willing to believe, and I'm willing to turn it over. 4 through 9 is about restoration. I'm restored to sanity. My way isn't working, and I get right with that. And then 10 through 12 is about transformation. You know, and as a result of 10 through 12 and doing the steps in order as they're intended, I'm rearranged from the inside out. And you guys told me if I did all these things, I would have a life beyond my wildest dreams. And you guys were right. I did. I didn't get a job. I got a career that I loved. You know, I stopped chasing around that hot angel, you know, a boyfriend that I really like. I mean, I held on to the wall chalkboard, you know, to try and make that relationship work. But, you know, God gave me all the indicators. It's not right, not right now, you know. My God never says no, just yes, not right now, or I got something better. But if you're like me and you're my kind of alcoholic, I'll just like hold on to my will and the way I think something should be until hit with a brick wall. So I got out of that relationship. Found another relationship, made that my higher power, but that's another story. I was able to make amends with that family. I was able to get right with my parents, and I was able to see that they did the best that they could with the tools that they had, and that they deserved a daughter who could show up. And my life got so big that I thought, thank you, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's been a pleasure. You've given me all these wonderful things. I know you guys say it's one day at a time, that you have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of your spiritual condition, but I think this is working out pretty good for me. And I don't think I need you guys anymore. And that cunning, baffling, powerful part of alcoholism, that whisper, it started to show up. Couldn't get to the meeting because I got work. The new boyfriend says, you were young. You really need to go to those meetings. It's not like you're going to drink, you know? Don't worry about it. My life started to get big. And I thought, well, I'll go to a meeting when you want me to give you a cake or when it's time to get a cake for myself, but I don't need to go. I don't need to have commitments. You do, I don't. My sponsees started to fall off. I couldn't understand why until someone said, well, maybe you don't have anything that they want anymore. And I just started to separate myself from you and ultimately God. And what you all told me is that anything I put in front of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll lose. And that's exactly what happened. 14 years of sobriety, it all came crashing down. That job and career that I loved, well, people stopped liking to work with me because no one likes a follower-upper, a micromanager, just circling back, you're not doing it right, I could do it better type of person. I don't know how to be a worker amongst workers. Remember, this is my work, not our work. And I was in a relationship I had no business being in, held him hostage, made him my higher power. That didn't work, blamed him for that, stopped showing up for my parents, for my baby brother. Friends didn't like me anymore. The chaos that I was causing in relationships, you don't do something the way I think you should do it, and I'm going to tell, completely back to the girl that I was when I was dry from alcohol. And the only thing that I didn't do was pick up a drink or a drug. And it all came crashing down. And the only thing I knew to do, because I never was suicidal, but I understand. Like I understand like needing relief. And that's why I say like my alcoholism is going to treat itself one way or another. And I called one of those girls from the log cabin, one of my trudging buddies, one of those women who carried me when I couldn't carry myself from the beginning. And I said, hey, it's all falling apart. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And she's like, I'm going to pick you up. I'm going to take you to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was like, I don't think you heard me. It's all falling apart. I'm going to need more than a meeting. And she said, I'll pick you up at 7. Meeting starts at 7:15. She took me to the Melrose Manfield meeting, 7:15. Monday nights, it's still there. It used to be the whenever, whatever meeting where you could talk about whatever. And I don't remember who the speaker was. I don't remember anything the speaker said. But when the speaker was done sharing, they said it was time for participation. And my friend said, you should raise your hand and share. And I said, well, you should work your own program. And she said, well, you should start working one of your own. I'm defiant as all hell. And I just think I know everything, even when my whole world is falling apart and life is on fire. And power grid myself, my hand shot up and I shot up and I went to the podium. I said, I'm Cara and I'm an alcoholic. And I had nothing to say for myself at 14 years of sobriety. And I ran to the bathroom and I started sobbing and she followed me in there and she said, probably saved your life tonight. You definitely saved someone else's. Get a sponsor, jump back into the steps. It's not too late. It's never too late until it's too late.
10 minutes.
Thank you. And that's what I did. Jump back into the steps. I got a sponsor who had what I wanted. And this time not this time. I chose someone who had a real connection to a power greater than myself, because what I had realized is that as my life had gotten bigger, my God had not. Now, God is always big, but I stopped seeking a God in all of my affairs. I didn't realize that as my life got bigger, my God had to get big with it. Because first I'm just trying not to drink or use. And then what happens is I get a life beyond my wildest dreams, and I need that God to turn the things in my life over to. There's another great speaker by the name of Bob Darrell, and he talks about it's not enough for the alcoholic just to have faith. We also have to have trust in a higher power. And he talks about the difference between faith and trust. And he gives this analogy of watching a tightrope walker push a wheelbarrow over a tightrope. And everyone's sitting down and is looking up, and they have faith that it's not going to fall. He's done this a million times. Of course, he's going to cross that tightrope. Trust is getting in that wheelbarrow. And I have to be in that wheelbarrow when life is in session, because otherwise it's too much for me. I can't handle it. I'm maladjusted. I realized finally what it means that I have to have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. I have to do this thing one day at a time. If you're new, you don't know what that means. I can't stay clean off of yesterday's shower. Period. Because I wake up with untreated alcoholism every morning, and it wants to keep me separate. So first thing I do in the morning is I hit my knees. I ask God to come into my life. And then I get really quiet and I listen for God's design for me that day. I send the daily reflection to the group of women that I sponsor, grand sponsor, and great grand sponsor. They share their gratitude and I read it throughout the day. I have to put God at the beginning of my day. Otherwise, it is just chaotic. And what my life looks like today is amazing. That incredible, hot, gorgeous white angel is my husband today. Naomi, your face. Yeah, he's my husband today. And he's actually in Tennessee right now at a men's retreat with Mike Allison and Bob Bazance and Jason Johnson and all of these just gigantic, amazing examples of Alcoholics Anonymous, these incredible communicators. And they are doing a workshop, and they have Alcoholics Anonymous at the center of their lives. And as a result, I get to have Alcoholics Anonymous at the center of my relationship because we both have this language of the heart. And if God had given me what I wanted 2 decades ago, I wouldn't have known what to do with it. God never says no, just yes, not right now, or I've got something better. And I know that to be true. It just never would have worked out on my terms. I often think, well, okay, like, how do I know when it's Cara's will versus God's will? And the truth is, like, Cara's will is desperate, it's urgent, it's manipulative, it's full of anxiety and control, and that feeling is Cara's will. God's will just flows effortlessly and without the need to have my hands on the steering wheel. And when that man came back into my life at that exact moment where we could meet each other where we were at, that was the right time. And by the way, it's not about the guy. If he left tomorrow, it'd be fine because I'm okay on the inside. That's what I know to be true. I have 13 women that I get to watch the light in their eyes turn on. I'm reading with Alicia right now. And as we go through the big book and I get to hear her experience and her awakening in our situations in our lives, our sobrieties are completely different. She's a mother, she's married a long time. She has her own story, not at all similar to mine, except with our relationship with alcohol. And as we get to read the literature, we get to connect on the experience that Bill had in 1935 and the message of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a career that I love, and it's not by any means the career that I thought I was going to have and what I planned for myself. It's better. That's what I know about Alcoholics Anonymous is like, I make plans, God laughs, and if my plans work out, I'm shortchanging myself. Big time. Man, am I shortchanging myself. I have a life that's so full. I have a sponsee who's celebrating a year today. I get to go to a meeting. I get to show up for her. I get to give her a cake, and I get to hear about how her life has changed as a result of being willing to do the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh my God. It just overwhelms me with gratitude because I'm just this broken, selfish little girl who's only thinking about me. How can I get what I want? I need to feel okay. I'm going to use you in order to be okay. And when that stops working, I'm going to move on and find something else. And that is not how I think today. Like, how can I show up and be of service? And by doing that, I think less about me. Someone's like, God, you have a lot of sponsees, and it's not, I mean, not comparative to what I have heard, but like, how do you get anything done? I get more done because there's less time to worry about me. You know, I get to be in action, not in thinking, because I'm just like, I could wallow in thought. My favorite language is victimese, like, why is this happening to me? Like, that's, I'm fluent. I'm fluent. But when I have these incredible women call me and share what's going on with them, I'm no longer thinking about me. It's just like incredible how this thing works. And I want to share when I did the steps, I got 7 years ago, 8 years ago, um, with Sam this time around, when we got to the ninth step, we started talking about, what I wasn't willing to do for alcohol. I mean, I was willing to sacrifice the relationship with my family, my career, my health, my body, everything. And what I was willing to sacrifice for the job or the guy, in sobriety when I stopped working my program. And it was clear that, you know, I was willing to go to any lengths for those things, those things that kept me sick. So why wasn't I willing to go to those things for my recovery? I've got to treat my recovery the same way I'm going to treat my disease. And so that's the amends that I've made to myself. And it's so funny because, if you have the privilege of sponsoring women and being around newcomers, which is such a gift of this program, I often have someone come up to me and say like, oh, well, will you sponsor me? And I say, yeah, why don't you meet me at a meeting? I'm going to be at this meeting at this time. Here's my number, meet me there. And then we'll read availing yourself of a sponsor and we'll go from there. 9 times out of 10. Oh, yeah, I was gonna come, but there's street cleaning on the street and I couldn't find any parking. So yeah, I just went home. Or, well, I was gonna come, but it's raining and rain, so not gonna be able to make it. Or, oh, well, I have tennis. Or it's a holiday. Or you name it. And I think to myself, man, there wasn't a damn time when I went to go get a bottle of alcohol at the liquor store and I couldn't find parking. And I thought, well, not tonight. I'll just go home. Not once. There was never a time I was circling MacArthur Park and I was like, oh, that drizzle. I should get home. You know what? Never mind this. Not once. I drank on every holiday. I drank in 5 o'clock traffic. I drank at 7 a.m. I mean, that I was willing to go to those lengths. I have to go to those lengths to treat my recovery today because I know what happens when I put anything in front of this. I know what happens if I say, hey, Jay, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I know I said yes, but hopefully you can find someone else. I'm going to send someone in my place. I know what happens. I start separating myself from you, and then I separate myself from God, and all bets are off. I am so grateful for my sobriety today. Everything I have, it's a direct result of the life that you guys have given me, the grace and the compassion that you have bestowed upon me, and the walking of the walk and the talking of the talk that you guys have demonstrated for me one day at a time. My name is Cara, and I'm an alcoholic. Thanks so much.
Yay. Oh my God. So